Good evening to folks out there on YouTube channel watching Ballard District Council. Welcome to our December 2020 meeting. Here we are at the last month of 2020 already. I think I can almost hear a collective heave of thank God from the chorus out there around Ballard. May it only sort of start getting better with the new year. I think we're all hoping for that. Really happy to be back online. Would love to be together with everybody in person like we used to be, but relieved that this sort of year has been one of incredible technological jumps for most of us, even though I think all this technology kind of existed for everybody to access before now. So here we are with another Zoom presentation, Ballard District Council meeting. Really looking forward to a good discussion, a bunch of information coming out from a bunch of organizations tonight. The focus is on organizations providing services to folks who are homeless in Ballard, services of a whole variety of types from different organizations. And so we're going to pass the hat pretty quickly in terms of who's on camera and telling you about what their organization and or facility is doing in Ballard. But I think folks are going to have a chance to kind of really get oriented to a good handful of the really outstanding services that are going on and what has clearly been a time of only growing need among folks here in Ballard and across the city of Seattle. And all prognostics sort of suggest that that's not going to change in the immediate future. Hopefully the Congress will come through with some additional aid funding for states and cities, but in the meantime, I think we're still looking at folks really having to kind of squeak by in a lot of ways that is regrettable. So that's enough probably of the soliloquy for me at the outset. Want to note real quick that for long-standing attendees, the Ballard District Council, we're typically doing a fair little bit of organizational business sort of in the fourth quarter of the Ballard District Council. And typically in December, we would even be undertaking elections of new officers to the organization. So we didn't want to just let that go unmentioned. What we've, though, decided is that with all the chaos and not being able to meet in person and not really having a great amount of interaction among the different organizations that have traditionally made up the Ballard District Council and not really being able to have folks from the community join us too easily, but more just watch us on TV, that we're just going to sort of hold the pattern right now, keep the same slate of officers continuing on the board, trying to keep things going. So that's me as president, Andy Gerald's vice president, and then the fine folks, Jody Grage, John Mitchell, Tom Friedman, and Don Benson serving basically as our executive board. So we'll just keep going that way. We're probably also going to really try to address and make some updates to the bylaws of the organization and probably approach some of the sort of organizational structure a little bit in this coming year too, once we get back on a kind of normal plan. But for now, we're just going to keep trying to access the community via the YouTube and other social media kind of tools. In all the light of the Facebook news today, I almost called them weapons. But in any case, try and access all the social media tools to get to folks in Ballard and around the city with what's going on in Ballard. And continue to build a bridge as best we can between the community and organizations and hopefully city departments and city elected officials in a way that we feel has been really extremely tough during this time to really keep a close connection with the city. Although I'd be failing if I didn't mention that our new council member Strauss has at least been to our meetings averaging quarterly this year. So we appreciate that. Look forward to having him continue to join us. Looks like we're freezing up on the YouTube. I don't know what that's about, but we're just going to continue and hope that the broadcast goes fine. I'm not going to waste any more time because, like I said, there's a bunch of folks and we're going to eat it all up really quickly. We're going to go one by one, and I'm going to start by just basically handing the mic, and I'm going to make sure I unmute you, or you probably can unmute yourselves. We're happy to be joined tonight by Tim Parham, Lena Mendoza, and Kathy Martin from Plymouth Housing. who are going to give us a presentation and talk a little bit about their new project that's about to break ground, actually, just south of Ballard High School. So with that, I'll just hand it off to you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Brent, and everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and I share my screen for a PowerPoint.
Sounds
good. Oh, I guess that it says
I'm
host
happy
disabled.
to allow you to do that.
Yep.
See if I can figure out how to do that.
Sure. And while you're doing that, Brent, I can introduce myself and maybe we can go around. But I've been at Plymouth since 2013, coming up on 8 years here, and I oversee all our real estate development projects.
I've been at Plymouth for about 2 years now, and I'm our communications manager.
Hey everyone, I've been at Plymouth for under a year, and I am our strategic partnerships manager and here to answer any questions on volunteering, community engagement, anything like that. It's nice to meet everyone.
Tim, I see you're muted, but I don't see any reason you shouldn't be able to present. Maybe if you just try. There we go.
Can everybody see it now? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to launch into a PowerPoint and try to move through quickly, but since we're new to the neighborhood, wanted to give you some background on Plymouth, organizationally, who we serve, who we are, that sort of thing, what we'll be like as a neighbor before we dive right into our projects here in Ballard. So bear with me if you have questions as we go, put them in chat. Hopefully Lena or Kathy or I can help with that. So yeah, with that, I'll jump right in. Plymouth has been around for 40 years and started from the Plymouth Congregational Church in downtown, just with a group of folks in, the church basement, trying to figure out what to do around homelessness in downtown. In the early years in the 80s and 90s, they bought up some old hotels. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, we started developing our own projects. And now we have 15 buildings with over 1,000 apartments. And those are all for homeless folks, individuals that have experienced homelessness. Plymouth focuses solely on individuals. There's a lot of other groups that do housing for homeless youth or families in the region, and we sort of focus on that niche, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But before we do that, I would talk about our model, and forgive me if I'm going to look over here at my slides. So our model is housing first, and it's a simple yet powerful concept that folks can't deal with whatever struggles are going on with their lives without a roof over their heads. They don't have to show proof of being ready for housing or any sort of criteria other than being willing to sign a lease and be a part of our buildings. And these are just some of the things that we believe and we empower and we provide. So that's sort of our model, the housing first model. And who do we serve a little bit? This slide gets into that. I think there's something like 11,000 people experiencing homelessness throughout King County. Of that 11,000, I think almost this number, 29% of all people are in King County that are experiencing homelessness are experiencing what we call chronic homelessness. Those are the folks that aren't hitting a rough patch and need to crash the couch on. They're folks that have been on the streets and dealing with, that trauma. May have other things going on in their life, maybe disabilities or behavioral health or other medical conditions that we're uniquely qualified to serve that group of folks. And what are the demographics of the folks we serve across our portfolio? Almost all of them have some sort of disability. And 58% have mental health conditions. 47% were people of color. Some are veterans. Many are over the age of 55. These folks have lived hard lives, and they're thankful when they come into Plymouth and find, a lot of support. And I'm going to introduce a term here that we use to define Plymouth's intervention into homelessness, which is called permanent supportive housing. I'm going to sort of break that down here. That's what this slide does, is it talks about what that term really means. And it says here on the slide, but it's permanent. We're not providing a temporary place for folks to stay. They have a lease. Many guests stay until they pass away. And supportive, the part of it is that we provide, whatever folks need to be successful and to continue to stay housed. We operate at a ratio of 1 housing case manager or social worker per 25 residents. And that's what we'll have at this project in Ballard. And our housing case managers we'll talk about more, but are really amazing people that just do everything from qualifying somebody for Social Security or other income sources to helping them get groceries or go to the food bank to get their medical appointments, to connecting them to substance abuse or behavioral health services if they need those things. So, and it works. 97% of the folks that we house stay in housing, which we'll talk about the benefits to all of us as taxpayers in the city for that statistic in a moment. So here's just some pretty pictures of some of our buildings, just to show you that even though it's not typical apartment, it looks just like it. We're under the same, design rules and all of that other apartment providers are. The magic is on the inside, where we'll have studio apartments for everybody, so everybody has their own kitchen and bath. But what's different is the amount of community space in our buildings is much greater than you'd see in a typical apartment. We have 2 large community rooms in our buildings, and we'll have that in Ballard. We also have a lot of offices for the many, many staff that provide the supportive services for folks. And almost all our buildings now, and we'll have this in Ballard as well, have an on-site nursing clinic, computer rooms, courtyards, all those sorts of things. So the supports, it's a picture of one of the nurses in one of our buildings with a client or resident. And our supports really are all about building relationships and a sense of community. You find when people are feeling supported and in a sense of community, it works much better than having an adversarial relationship and forcing folks to do something they don't really want to do. Again, permanent housing means lifelong care. More and more, it's about providing healthcare and supports for folks that have disabilities. Like I said, so many of our folks have disabilities. And just building those relationships with our housing case managers. Another key to this is that there's always somebody, if you're feeling lonely in your apartment, to go down and talk to at the front desk. And we'll talk about some of the other benefits of that to you all in the community as well. And then we touched on on-site nursing and medical care. So why is all that good for everybody in Seattle and King County? Well, because it's cost effective. So the folks that we're serving, like I said, they're the highest need, most vulnerable people in our region. And just frankly, if you're looking at it from sort of a dry dollars and cents perspective, they cost a lot of money to take care of. Because these are the types of folks that in order to get out of the rain, they might end up in county jail or in the ER room in Harborview. And when they're there, it costs us as taxpayers a lot more money to keep them out of the elements as it would to support them in a Plymouth housing project for 1 year. So you can see the slide here. We've done crunch the numbers, 3 months in King County jail or 3 days at the hospital costs as much as it does to house somebody for a full year at Plymouth. So we think it makes a lot of sense in that regard. So what are we like as a neighbor? Our development and operating principles are safety, design, and community. I mentioned that we have somebody on site at all hours of the day and night, every day of the year. And that serves 2 purposes, like I said, to help give our residents somebody to talk to at the front desk all the time. But it also is to be an asset to the neighborhood and to have eyes on the street and to know that somebody's around looking out on the street to protect everything. And then design, you know, we're a part of this unique process, which I'll talk about, and we're moving really fast on this one, so we haven't had a ton of time to engage with you all about design, but normally that would be our process. We do have a couple design things we're hoping to squeeze into our few minutes here tonight. And then the third thing is community. We know that COVID has made our outreach efforts really challenging, but we've appreciated the times that we've gotten to know a few of you and look forward to continuing to develop that relationship, because in the other neighborhoods across Seattle where our buildings are, if folks let us, we become dues paying members of groups like your district council, and we'd welcome that opportunity. You know, I'm on the front end doing the outreach now as we build the building, but you know, once it's up and operating, the staff on site would love to be a part of the community in a more formal way. So our residents, you know, they're leaseholders, just like anybody that rents an apartment. They have rights under that lease, but they also have responsibilities to, you know, pay us rent and have good behavior and all those sorts of things. So that's what this slide is about, is just acknowledging that we're not a shelter, we're not temporary, it's a permanent housing situation, just like any other apartment buildings around. And I guess the other thing I'd say on that is, you know, Plymouth's process is, you know, not to try to evict people right away if there's you know, bad behavior, that sort of thing, but we do have a process of case conferencing with our social workers and our property management staff. And if worse comes to worse, we will move forward with evictions. And the other thing I should mention here is just, you know, we follow the rules, and you know, we have a good relationship with the Seattle Police Department, and we're looking forward to making connections with the folks in the precinct near you guys, but haven't had a chance to make that connection yet. And also, just one thing that's different for probably all the folks that you're going to talk to tonight, you can rest assured that, you know, I'm a developer, but I'm not going to sell our building in 5 years, right? We wouldn't be allowed to. All our regulations and all our funding requires that we own and operate it as permanent supportive housing for the next 50+ years. So we'll be around, and you can always come and talk to us. And then I mentioned, you know, the 24/7 desk, and we'll show you design pictures later, but we've tried to be strategic in where we locate that desk, and we have a lot of glass so we can have a lot of sight lines out into the walkways around our site. So that's us as a neighbor. Just want to touch on briefly how we typically select our residents, or our residents come to us. We don't really select them. It used to be that Plymouth had our own waiting list that we monitor ourselves through our rental office. Over the past few years, since 2017, King County has implemented a program called Coordinated Entry for All. It's meant to streamline things and funnel everybody that's experiencing homelessness to a checkpoint within the county where they can be assessed, ranked, and then distributed out. And part of the reason for that is I talked about the cost efficiency of, you know, Plymouth versus a hospital or the jail, but in reality, we're much more expensive than a typical affordable housing project because of the level of services we provide. So it's making sure that folks that don't need as much services aren't getting into Plymouth. We're serving those high need folks. That's the intent of it. There's been some challenges to it and that sort of thing, and happy to talk more about that. But I had another slide in here just for time I cut out, but Plymouth has also pushed back on that system when appropriate. And we've talked to some of you in Ballard about ideas of connecting with Swedish Ballard and exploring ideas for local referrals to try to ensure that we're housing folks that are experiencing homelessness within Ballard. But yeah, we can talk more about that, you know, over the next year or so while we're building the building too. So finally, that's enough. That's some background about Plymouth and who we are and who we serve. And now a little bit about the project. So now is a point where I should, before I jump in, the project is at the corner of 15th Ave Northwest and Northwest 64th Street, just south of Ballard High, on a dry cleaning site. And It's actually the site and the development will be, the site is owned and the development will be done by the Inland Group out of Spokane. They're a developer that is vertically integrated with, you know, they're a general contractor as well as a developer. And it's part of an innovative program that the city of Seattle is doing to provide 500 new apartments of permanent supportive housing across the city really quickly. And there's some streamlined permitting and some other things that are going along with that. But I just wanted to mention the Inland Group. They've been great to work with, and they're technically the owners. Yep. So I see Brent has given me a warning. We're just about to the end. But yeah, this is a picture of the building here. You're looking sort of across 15th Ave at this rendering here. We'll have 81 apartments total. 2 of those apartments will be for live-in staff. We find it really important to provide housing for our staff. As you all know, affordable housing in general is a challenge. So providing that opportunity for our staff is really important. So 79 apartments will be for single adults who have experienced chronic homelessness. And we'll also have ground floor commercial towards the north side of the site at 15th. We're thinking maybe enough for 2 commercial spaces, about 1,000 square feet. So here's on the map. Here's where the commercial spaces will be, sort of towards the high school side. And then our front door will be over here on 64th. We'll have offices over here and community spaces over here. A lot of glass all the way around, like I talked about, with sight lines throughout. And that is pretty much it. If we have just, it sounds like I got 5 minutes. So here's some contacts for us. You have my email up here. You have Kathy up here, and the plug we want to give, you can reach out to Kathy, is in non-COVID times, the best way to get to know Plymouth is to come and tour one of our existing buildings, because it is hard to put words or pictures to what it would feel like. We'd love to get your email addresses so that when the time is right and when the vaccines are up and running and it's safe for us to do it, we could tour you all through it. But either way, if you're willing to share your emails in the chat or to contact Kathy, we'd appreciate it. And we also have some links here if you're interested in supporting or volunteering with Plymouth. Brent, is it okay if I just take 2 more minutes on a design thing? Okay. Go ahead. We'd also love folks' feedback on one of the few design things we can sort of get input on, since we're going through this unique process. It's really fast, which is the color of the building. We've gotten some feedback from the Ballard Alliance. Would love your feedback, but we have 3 options that we've been looking at. So this is sort of a blue and white accent colors. And again, this is 64th here, if you can see my cursor. And this is 15th. Here's a gray and orange accent color. I think this was preferred when we talked to the Ballard Alliance. And then here's a more earth tone tan and green option. But you want to put it in the chat, you want to email me, we'd love some feedback. We'd love to have you guys feel like you are part of this project in the community. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. If I can figure out how to do that and turn it back over to you guys.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Tim. Those all look like good options. I wonder if the orange could be like Ballard Beaver red orange kind of.
There you go.
Right there, a block from the high school, not even one. But thanks very much for that. Angie, I don't know, were we going to try and have a quick question or two for them? Do you have a couple questions? We're going to try and hit you with a couple quick questions, but we're already one presenter in, running a little behind. So let's try to be.
I'll try to keep it really brief, and maybe we can touch on some of them at the round table at the end. That was a really helpful presentation, though. Thank you so much. And some of the questions that came in were around safety in the neighborhood. And I know on an original phone call that some of us had together, I brought up the fact that Ballard has some of the slowest police 911 response times in the city. And I think that most of your other facilities are either downtown or First Hill, kind of more in the downtown core. And so we're just curious how you're modifying your safety planning to fit a neighborhood like Ballard.
Yeah, good, great question. And yeah, it's on our minds. And like I said, we're still reaching out, trying to make those local connections here. We have a really a couple contacts that serve downtown, but one of the things we're exploring is security guards currently in some of our properties. I think, you know, we have all the design things that I talked about. One of the things I didn't talk about is security cameras in the outside, but it's definitely something we're mindful of. And one of the things that we're actually most focused on right now is providing mental health services to our folks. It doesn't sound like a security measure, but you know, we're finding in COVID, we all need mental health support, and making sure that we have a robust care package, hopefully within our building, where currently we have to, you know, coordinate with folks outside of our building to provide that. So those are just a few things. Happy to.
Yeah, when you mentioned earlier that you were going to contact the precinct near us, it made me chuckle a little bit because there is no precinct near us. The North Precinct serves about, I think, 40% of the city's population, and especially with traffic and geography, it's a good 20 minutes or more to get a response often. Let's see, another very related question was, what would be kind of an average number of 911 calls that might come in for your facility, and how many of those kinds of incident categories could potentially lead to lockdowns at the high school? We've had quite a few incidents there in recent years, and I'm sure, you know, you guys try and run as peaceful of a facility as possible. But that was just a question that came up, is how often might there be an incident that rises to that level that the immediate neighborhood and Seattle Public Schools policies could have to kick into gear?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know off the top of my head how many incidents like that we have. I think given the population we serve and how many are disabled, I know that between ambulances and fire trucks and police, maybe around 3 visits a week, or somewhere in there. And we'll have 81 apartments here, so that hopefully isn't too burdensome, but we just want to be honest about that. That was the last data that I remember, but don't have specifics around how that might impact the high school or those type of security concerns. But it's a good question.
Yeah, and that, Brent, I'm assuming we need to move on quickly, but that one of the other questions that came up was just asking if you've had some planning and dialogue with school leadership and district leadership, and whether you have other facilities that are close to Seattle Public Schools. Is this a topic that's come up before, or is this site kind of unique that way?
Yeah, so we have had a good conversation with the principal there. We're hoping to try to find a way to connect in the fall, but that hasn't quite happened yet. But we'll continue to find avenues to connect there virtually with parents and that sort of thing, and continue to reach out. And you know, a few of us chatted before, we do have a school, or we do have a building that's close to O'Day High School, and a lot of kids come and go from there, and haven't had any concerns or issues with that. But definitely we're mindful of the proximity to the Ballard High, and it was thoughtful in our design in sort of putting our front door not on 15th and around the corner from things, so that there's just a clear separation. And there's even going to be a little cutout in 64th there for our tenants of, like, if they want to hang out outside, that's sort of the area. So we're trying to do what we can to sort of just make sure that there's a lot of separation between them.
Thank
Great.
you. Is that?
Yeah, I think we should really try and roll on. I don't want to take all of Hannah et al. Who follow, because we have a lot of great folks. But we did want to take just a few more minutes with a group and a facility and a new neighbor, compared to the good relationship we already have with a handful of neighbors who have already been here for a while. The first of whom is the Compass Housing Group, who run the URNESS house down on 56th Ave, just right kind of between 20th and 22nd, yes, 17th and 20th. So we're joined by Hannah Mystery tonight to talk a little bit about their work down there. And Hannah, I'll just let you make any further introduction you like.
Yeah, thank you, Brent, and thank you all for having me. I do just want to pull up a slideshow presentation really quickly. It sounds like a lot of, and I knew this going into it. We are very similar to Plymouth in a lot of the way we operate. I think, really value a lot of the same things in terms of housing first and trauma-informed care. So some of this stuff I'll be able to breeze through since they did such a good job of kind of introing a lot of those terms for us. But I'm Hannah Mystery. I'm the Senior Development Manager at Compass Housing Alliance. It does sound like you all have a fairly good background of the situation that we're in King County with homelessness. We did see a 5% increase with this year's one night count that happened back in January. So I do think it is worth noting that that was prior to COVID. That was prior to the mass job loss and all of the things that have happened this year. So unfortunately, it does seem like we will be seeing a continued increase in the years to come. So still a lot unknown there. And of course, this happens for a number of reasons. As I mentioned, job loss is one of the big ones. Lack of affordable housing in our area is a really big issue. Individuals struggling with behavioral health or disabilities that keep them from working or maybe maintaining stable housing. And then we also see quite a lot of folks experiencing homelessness if they've been in child welfare system or the criminal justice system. So there's just a lot of contributing factors that make homelessness a complex issue, and that really warrants a complex and intricate response as well. So here's what Compass is doing to help with all that. So just a little bit of an overview about us. We just celebrated our 100th birthday last month, which is really exciting. We were founded in 1920 in Pioneer Square, and we still have a building there now. But we operate both affordable housing and emergency housing, as well as emergency services throughout King County. So we have 20 locations throughout the area, with URNESS being in Ballard. So currently our full portfolio includes a hygiene center, which is located in Pioneer Square and offers showers, restrooms, places to do laundry for folks who are unstably housed. We also in that same building have mail services. So folks who don't have a permanent address can use that as their permanent address to receive prescriptions and their voter ballots and all of those important documents, and put those addresses down when they apply for jobs and things like that. We also have equitable and low barrier banking services in that building. So folks who maybe don't have all that same ID or maybe don't feel as comfortable in a typical banking environment can go there and create a little bit of stability in their lives to be able to really get out of homelessness and keep it that way. And then we also have 4 emergency housing shelters that are open 24/7 with 234 shelter beds, and then 670 units of affordable housing, with most of those being in permanent supportive housing buildings. And then in total, we offer comprehensive assistance to unstably housed veterans, families with children, individuals with disabilities, men and women with complex needs. So really covering just the full spectrum of housing instability and homelessness. Through our permanent affordable housing programs, we serve about 2,000 folks every year. And then through all of our programs, it's about 13,000 people that we're able to reach. So just a little bit about, and I'll only briefly touch on this because Plymouth, again, did such a great job of kind of talking about a lot of the same things that we value. We're very people-centered. We want to create a dignified place for folks to call home. Our affordable housing complexes are just like apartments, just at kind of a lower rent with those on-site supports included. We like to address barriers to stability. We are all housing first development, so there are no barriers to entry in getting a house. And we like to create engaged and supportive communities. So every time we choose a location for one of our new developments, we try to do it in a way that keeps folks closer to job centers, transit. This URNESS house is very close to the local library. We try to stay closer to schools so our developments with families can easily access those things. So URNESS house, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, opened in 2013 in the Ballard neighborhood. We have 80 apartments there, mainly studios. We house individual men and women who have all experienced chronic homelessness. So as was previously mentioned, these are often folks that are the hardest to keep housed. They've experienced homelessness for either a year or 4 or more times within the last 3 years. So these are folks who, again, they don't just need a little bit of time on someone's couch to get back on their feet. There's a lot more deeper issues there that we try to address through these programs. And then in addition to that, all of our residents within this development earn an average annual income of under $20,000 a year. So the community itself is named for Reverend URNESS, whose philosophy of meeting people where they're at is fundamental principle of our work. So that comes in through our trauma-informed care, the way we train our case managers, our program managers, and all of our staff on site to make sure that we're putting people first and creating a dignified environment where folks can really feel at home. And so again, just kind of reiterating, we're a housing first development, so there are no barriers. And then in addition to that, we do offer the supports of case management. We have an on-site medical clinic, which I'll touch on briefly in a moment. We offer daily meals. And then we just have a lot of community building resources for folks who may otherwise feel isolated or maybe not have access to a lot of the same job training opportunities or different things like that we like to offer for our residents. And again, this model is effective, and it's proven to be effective across the country. I have a statistic here. Investments in permanent supportive housing have helped decrease the number of chronically homeless individuals by 20% since 2007. So this model is working. It's taking time, but it's working and it's effective. And it's also shown to lower those public costs associated with crisis services like shelters, hospitals, jails, prisons, all of those things that we want to keep folks out of for their sake and then for the community's sake as well. So we are particularly proud of our positive outcomes at URNESS House. We do have a 92% housing retention rate across all of our programs, including NYER. And then we have a 0% exits to homelessness rate. So even once folks move on from URNESS House, we don't see any of them returning to homelessness because they've been able to build that stability into their lives. Of course, some of the challenges we have had this year are centered around the pandemic. We do have a lot of residents who are feeling isolated, maybe struggling with their mental health. Our staff is doing the best that they can to provide virtual or socially distanced opportunities for engagement. A great example of that is one of our case managers at NYER, who used to be a barista, is starting to teach virtually or in a social distance setting barista classes to some of our residents, teaching them how to make drinks with the intent of eventually, once we have COVID restrictions lightened a little bit or the vaccine is out there, whatever that looks like, to open a coffee shop in the lobby of URNESS for the residents so that they can kind of gain those job skills, get some of those social skills built as well. So we think that'll be a really exciting program to come up in the next couple of years. And the next piece I did mention, we have an on-site clinic. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not with Neighbor Care. I see that they're speaking after me if I'm not mistaken, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention this partnership. So in the building, we do have the Neighbor Care Health Clinic, and we love Neighbor Care. They're the largest provider of primary medical care services for families and individuals experiencing homelessness in our area. So who better than to be on site for us to not only help our residents, but help other members of the Ballard community experiencing homelessness and housing instability with all of their healthcare needs. I mean, coming to be a very critical service this year, especially, but really every year, and offering just the most basic healthcare, emergency dental care, behavioral health support is a really big piece as well. And then of course, substance abuse treatment, like medication assisted treatment for opioid use, we found has been very beneficial. So how can you help as residents of Ballard? So of course, just in your everyday life, small acts of kindness are always a great way to go. I always say making eye contact, saying hello to folks that you see. You're all neighbors. We're all a community. We should all appreciate one another and really take the time to say hi, maybe start a conversation. Keeping essentials on hand is always great to do. And then how can you help Compass this holiday season? So of course, things are a little bit different with the COVID restrictions in place. we're doing a holiday gift card drive rather than our typical gift drive. We would typically solicit physical gifts. We'd have a huge party at one of our locations to wrap them all, pass them out to all the residents. But this year we're doing gift cards because we're not able to do that. So, but we do think that will enable folks to feel a little bit more independent and have a little bit more autonomy over what they're purchasing, either for themselves or for their loved ones. And then of course, holiday meal supplies, Amazon wish list, and then just general donations are always helpful. But you can always go to our website. There's plenty of information about NYER, all of our other wonderful programs, the work that we do. And then you can always just give me a call or send me an email. I'm happy to either direct you to the right person or take care of whatever it is that you have a question for. So that is all I have. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, Hannah, I have one.
Yeah.
Do you have a good neighbor agreement with the neighborhood?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you have a good neighbor agreement with the neighborhood?
That is a great question. I believe we do, but I'm not 100% sure, but I could get that information for you and confirm that, but I believe we do.
Brent, could I ask one very quick question?
Of course.
For the neighbor care clinic, I know in the past they were good about just walk-in patients. During COVID, has that been possible at all? If someone in the neighborhood is suffering, can you still say, go to neighbor care, or has that had to be limited?
I am not 100% sure, not being an employee of neighbor care. I do believe I saw on their website, right now they prefer appointments just with the COVID restrictions. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that they're not allowing the occasional walk-in. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Hannah, could you just say a little more about the sort of daily services versus the permanent resident services? It's not clear to me exactly sort of what service you're providing to folks who don't live there.
At URNESS House?
URNESS, yeah.
We don't currently offer any services out of URNESS House that are specifically for folks not living there. I would say just about all of our day services, our essential services, if you will, operate out of our hub in Pioneer Square at the Compass Center.
So it's more of a system-wide.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Great. Anybody else? All right, we'll just keep moving through then. Next, I think it was going to be Jeff, but maybe Andrew, are you here to talk a little bit about the urban rest stop, or someone else?
I'm here. So I'm Andrew Constantino. I forgot my fancy PowerPoint at home.
No need.
But I can talk a little bit about Low Income Housing Institute. That's who I work for. I'm an assistant program manager for the tiny house villages and shelters. I'm pretty familiar with the urban rest stop, that's in Ballard. It offers laundry, showers, and like connection to services to people experiencing homelessness. But we don't have one of the direct staff people here today. I mainly work with the tiny house villages. Alyssa Colville is with me. She's the manager of Whittier Heights Village. So I'll just say briefly a little bit about the tiny house villages. There are 8 of them right now in Seattle. There's another one that's being constructed and will be open in Skyway by the end of the year. The tiny house villages have a little bit of history. One of the first sanctioned encampments was in Ballard on Market Street. Down by the locks. And while that site was open, we started the construction of the tiny house as the model. So it had some of the first tiny houses located at it, but eventually its permit expired. Since then, the tiny house village program has really evolved. So we've perfected the art of building the houses themselves, organizing volunteers to do so, and kind of improving on what the villages can be. So, in the early days, it was just a place where people were allowed to camp, using a tent. The tiny house villages now, though, all have showers, bathrooms. They have case management on site. They have on-site staff. Many have, other services available like drug treatment or mental health. And we also do meals, and I'm sure Alyssa will mention more of the amenities that Whittier Heights specifically has. How do people get into the tiny house villages is usually a big question, you know, since visible homelessness is at an all-time high in Ballard. You know, I myself lived in Ballard for about 10 years until really I was priced out of the neighborhood. And so I'm very aware of, you know, how much it has grown. And so, I mean, I'm asked all the time, you know, people are like, I know this person, they're sleeping on the street. How do they come to the village? The city has created like kind of almost a coordinated entry for that through the city's navigation team, you know, which has since been defunded. So we're kind of in this lurch at the end of the year of not really knowing how these things work. But it's through organizations like REACH or LEAD or Urban League, people that do like deep outreach to people living on the street. They'll meet a client, you know, and kind of trying to connect them to services. They have the power to refer someone to a village. So that's how Whittier would receive people, and how most of the villages work. Whittier is quite small, women only, but most of the villages throughout the city have about 50 people, you know, 50 adults living at them. There's variations on the model. So some, you know, allow children, some allow, you know, animals, things like that. There's slight variations to kind of focus on different demographics. The villages, you know, have proven themselves as their goal. The purpose of the tiny house villages is to get people permanently housed, you know, and so kind of like policing villagers and, you know, micromanaging is not the goal of the village, you know. So we do have villages that are of a harm reduction model, you know, where we're focused on stability and safety and helping that villager get permanent housing, you know, not making sure that they part their hair and tie their shoes. And there is a village pretty close to Ballard still, the original one, which was a tent encampment many years ago. It's in Magnolia, Interbay Village. You know, I've worked from that since the very beginning, you know, had some connection to it. And so I'm on site most days over there as well. But I'll let Alyssa talk more about Whittier.
Thank you, Andrew, for that lead in. So Whittier Heights Village has 15 houses for 15 women. We offer, you know, 24/7 staff, warm showers. We have 2 bathrooms, 2 fridges. We have a full kitchen. And we actually, our community room is actually enclosed. So it's in an enclosed building. We offer a warm meal every evening. And then we also get, you know, food donations from community members in the area. Ballard Food Bank donates every Tuesday. So we have an abundance of food for the women. Let's see here. You know, I started here in October, so I'm kind of brand new, but since I've started, case management, because we do offer, you know, case management on site. And so case management has been able to permanently house one woman. We have another one who is currently looking for housing. They have a voucher. We actually have 2 women that have vouchers. So working on getting, you know, 3 women permanently housed here within the next 2 months or so. So that's really great. We really just want to provide a safe space for the women to heal and have a stable roof over their head and be able to start dreaming about their next steps in life, right? And so we're able to do that with case management. Personally, we've had some issues, as I'm sure everybody else will share, with COVID being a challenge as far as having volunteers come in and lead groups. And, you know, our case management and I had really hoped to start kind of a life skills group for the women while they're staying there. And so hopefully once COVID restrictions are lifted, we're able to move forward with that, because I think that the women would really benefit from that. But we have some really great community members that donate and that are very supportive of the village, which is really wonderful. I really feel in my short time there that we're very welcome in the community, and we're really grateful for the members around us that donate, you know, blankets and toiletries and donate meals and all that good stuff. So, you know, if anybody's interested in helping during the holidays, I think one of the things that the women would appreciate is like gift cards. I think that gives them the autonomy to be able to spend how they want. You know, so yeah, I think that kind of wraps it all up for Whittier Heights here, but thank you all for having us.
Yes, I have a question.
Mhm.
I was involved with the Ballard location. My Rotary Club installed solar panels because they didn't have electricity in the houses and the tents and so on. But they were on like a 2-year window, and then they had to move. Do you still have that risk? I mean, is that still a problem, or have we gotten by that?
So you remember Mark Buick. He's the one who organized the solar panels, wasn't he?
Yes, he was a member of my Rotary Club. Mark and
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time putting those suckers in.
Yes, and it was great. I mean, thank you so much. I remember at that time when the sanctioned encampment, you know, it was really just an experiment, right? To say, well, sweeping people from here to there is kind of a waste of money and time, and it's abusive, you know, to people that have nothing. So, hey, let's say you can camp here if you can follow these rules. So during that time, the Ballard location, which was one of the first tent encampments under Mayor Murray, had no running water and no power, you know,
Right.
And so the Ballard Rotary Club, they got it together and they were able to provide solar panels, which could provide light, you know, someone could charge a phone, and it was a huge blessing. And I know that they did it as well for the site that I'm mentioning in Interbay, you know, the one in Magnolia as well. And so as far as permits go, things have changed a bit, you know. So back then, you know, it's kind of like, and it makes sense. We don't know how this is going to go. We don't quite know how it will work out. So let's say we'll do it for a year, and at the end of a year, we'll re-examine what's happened and are we okay with the second year? So that really is a great way to start, you know, when you're not sure. But now, you know, as it's kind of progressed, now that we're about 5 years in, we've seen that the villages, we can provide more services and more stability when we have a bigger time frame. You know, so we can bring showers in, we can electrify the village so that people can have heat and light in their unit. So long as we know that those kind of capital investments will be able to last for a while. And so even though Ballard's site, the tent encampment, its permit expired, the one in Magnolia is another example of the first generation of them. So it lost its site, but Magnolia wanted to keep that community together, you know, because they've seen so many people benefit from it. So the Port of Seattle offered a new piece of property, and they said the only condition is we want it to be upgraded to the modern version of the village. You know, so we replaced every tent with a tiny house. We electrified all of it, you know, got water, showers, things like that. And so now that's kind of like the new generation of them, you know. So like at Whittier Heights, you know, they have all those amenities because of some of the struggles that happen at that first site.
Yeah,
I do have a photo if you want to see. Can I share my screen? I'll just show you a quick picture.
Be able to. I don't know why you can't. If you can't, you should be able to. There you go.
So this is, you know, a village right now. This is one on the south end. I think I have a photo of Whittier here. And you can see that, you know, the houses have gotten a little fancier. We have lots of volunteers that build them. You know, they are taxpayer funded. The piece of property it varies. Sometimes it's leased by Seattle City Lights. Occasionally, LIHI owns a property that it's going to build housing development on. You know, it's a low-income housing provider. And so that might take a few years. So in that interim period, you know, we could do a village for a couple of years. This is, even though it's at night a little dark, this is Whittier Heights Village, you know, where Alyssa's the manager. You know, I thought it might be fitting to show, you know, a Christmas photo, a little bit of decoration. And, you know, I think it's important to understand sometimes people have this impression that the clients at the village are some special homeless like cast of people. No, you know, when you see someone in a tent or sleeping in a doorway, that is our clients. You know, the difference when they're at the village, you know, when you see them, you know, looking happy and life is, you know, looking up for them. It's the same people that are being given a first opportunity, you know, and so the villages really kind of fill in that missing starting point for a lot of people. Come in out of the cold and, you know, remember who you are again, remember your name again, you know.
I agree with that. I was in the process of installing all those and then eventually taking them all down. I got to know a lot of the residents there, and I was very impressed with the people themselves. They were just some really fantastic people. I was just, they were.
Do you remember the single dad and his son?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So, you know, for the sake of privacy, I won't say any names, but he has housing now. His son's growing up and they're doing great. You know, so
That's
a lot of the
fantastic.
early encampment campers and villagers, you know, it's so amazing to see them get housing to move on. And I mean, I really feel like the villages have been an amazing first step for people.
Yep. I know exactly which unity lived in.
That's great, Andrew. Thanks very much. That was really good, clear description of a lot of what you guys are doing and what's working and what some of the challenges are. It led me to a handful of questions, but I'm going to try and defer to our planned format, which is to basically kind of do more of a roundtable question at the end. So I won't ask you specific questions now, but I imagine we will have some here in a few minutes.
I can put my email in the chat, and if you want to ask me any question, I love spicy, difficult questions. So, you know, if you want to talk about drugs and crime and what happens when someone breaks the rules, I love talking about all those things. And you'll find that I'm not interested in the dog and pony show. I will give you practical answers.
That's great. Yeah, that's definitely the kind of conversation we've been wanting to have with folks who join us at these meetings. And we had a pretty good discussion of that kind with Councilmember Strauss last month. So hopefully we can continue in that vein. I want to move on to our last presenter though. Jen Adams is here to talk about the Bridge Care Center. Jen, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Boy, I didn't prepare anything like what they did.
Well, you tell us.
So I am one of the outreach workers for the Bridge Care Center located in the heart of Ballard at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Ballard, the Ballard Bridge Care Center is run by Quest Ministries. We're a tiny little faith-based organization. We don't force faith to come into our doors. It's there if you want to talk about it, but we're just open armed and welcoming all people, low income, and mostly our people are unhoused. So when we first started this back in 2011, we were doing a ministry, Take It to the Streets. And we had a Q Cafe over off of Dravis. And Take It to Streets, we did it at the Safeway on 15th and Market. And they would just lug these big bins to the Safeway and pass out socks and coats and blankets and all these really warm, fuzzy things for unhoused neighbors. And that was a great concept. And they did it, I think, twice a month at the time. And they did that for a couple of years, but they wanted more. And they rented a facility on 51st next to the Brown Bear Car Wash from a fisheries. I can't remember which fisheries. I always get it wrong. But one of the fisheries rented it to us at like an insane, almost free price. I think we fixed the roof and then they lowered our rent even more. And we were just to have this building until they sold it. And so we were in there for, I think, 2 years. Yeah, we were in there a couple years and it went really well. We were pretty good with the neighbors. Everything was going good. But they sold the building. And so that's when we joined our partnership with St. Luke's. And we moved into their building and we run a day center in the middle of their courtyard. We have a facility that runs a men's clothing room and a women's clothing room. And before COVID, people were allowed in the building and we had a day room where you could watch a movie. And we had a center area where you could get all the services you wanted. We had a giant map that showed you where everything was and where you could find it in the city. Pamphlets for all these places and places that just spoke. For LIHI, the tiny villages, all that. We linked our people to everything we could. We had on-site case management, and we just really were doing a really good job getting people up and out and into services. And we were bringing people into our building. We had Reach there weekly. We had Solid Ground come in weekly. We have really good partnerships with LIHI and neighbors in the area. The library, we work well with St. Luke's and Edible Hope Kitchen. So just the biggest challenges we had was with the COVID. We've had to change all that. We don't have access. We can't have people inside. We have to have a lot of social distancing. And we were kind of worried about it at first. St. Luke's closed everything down, so we couldn't do anything at St. Luke's. So we brainstormed and we moved our facility down to Quest. And we did 2 big get-togethers, and we served a total of 136 people, and everybody got everything from hats to socks. I mean, they were completely clothed by the time they left. They had water and snacks and some things, and those went really well. And then as they lifted some of the closures, and then the diocese said that, okay, you can go ahead and be back on the premises and you can start to do this. But so we came up with a plan, and we're not going to have it inside the building. And so we opened one door for the men's room and one door for the women's room, and they walk up from the outside, and we take an order of their clothing, and then we all scurry in the building and get the stuff and bring it out to them. And it's been a really great process. We haven't had any incidents. It's been really, I think our people were just missing us so much that it's just, it's been really, really beautiful to see in a very odd way. What else did hold on while I put myself together here. We have built some really good relationships internally. We have an ARC program, which is advocates representing the community. So we take people who are on the cusp of getting out of homelessness. Maybe they have a voucher and they've got 1 foot in homelessness and 1 foot kind of on the way out. And we put them through a 6-month program. We give them a little bit of stipend. We pay some bills for them. And we get them into programs and help them steer their own ship and get them going. And right now we have 2 wonderful participants that are, one's getting ready to go back to school and one is in school. They both just got housing. I mean, it's just, we've had in the last couple weeks 6 people that we've been associated with housing. And I've been able to deliver furniture and all these kind of goodies from other people in the neighborhood, and it's been really neat. The Bridge Cares mission is always to help people where they're at, and a lot of what everybody else was saying here is the same principles that we run on to. We run on the auspices of it's their ship, and we're not here to run it for them. We're just here to help them steer it. Yeah, right now we're open one more Tuesday, which will be December 15th, and we've averaged 30 to 40 clients. It's not near the numbers we were before. We were probably running 30 to 40 clients per day, and we were open 2 days a week, and then first and third Saturday. So on staff, we have 5 paid employees, but we have 40 outside volunteers that we've had for a long time. They go through a pretty good training before we even let them talk to anybody. But we have some, I know of at least a couple volunteers that have been volunteering for the bridge at least 7 years. So we've been running since 2011. So we run a fiscal budget every year of 150,000. We're almost solely supported by the Quest Church. We get 100,000 directly from them every year, and then we do outside fundraising for donations for the extra 50,000. At this point, we run a Facebook and an Instagram page that we hope that you will follow, and you can look them both up by looking up Ballard Bridge Care Center. Bridge Care Center. And then if you need to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us through info@bridgecarecenter.org. What did I miss? We love our neighbors. We believe in people, and we have seen a lot of people come from very hard times and help them. And we have a very big handful of participants that have gone through the ARC program that are mentors and come back and help our people. And we hope to grow and grow and grow that mentorship. Just, you know, the best way to pull somebody out of a situation is somebody who's been in that situation before. It's very important to listen in this industry and listen to hear, not to answer. And it's important.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all very much. It's really interesting to learn what everyone's doing. It's interesting to hear how much of a gigantic kind of organizational network is at work all the time trying to solve these issues. I mean, the number of organizations that each of you sort of referred to as collaborators, partners, sister organizations. I mean, there's this giant infrastructure going on, and yet it's also just such a growing, raging kind of secondary pandemic, if I can call it that right now, in Ballard and across Seattle. I think we will try and have a really interesting kind of, and hopefully somewhat challenging conversation about it with those of you for the sort of 15, 20 minutes we have left. I won't start it off though. I'll invite Angie, who's kind of been organizing questions from others in the community and participants, to kind of get started with some questions and follow up.
Great, and I was just going to double check if Jody Grage, are you still there? Yes. And can unmute yourself.
Yes, I am.
So Jody and I were kind of tag teaming, gathering and editing questions from the community. Jody, do you actually want to kick this portion off? Or?
That would be fine. It's been very interesting hearing what everyone had to say, and I'm adjusting some of the questions because of the information that has already been given. One of the questions that we talked about was, because there is this tremendous concentration of service providers between Ballard Commons Park over to the urban rest stop, we were wondering how much coordination and cooperation has developed among these groups so that you can share best practices, tell us more about what can be done to help. So the question is, how much coordination is there? Are you planning to do more? And how can the Ballard District Council help with that? So I don't know who wants to speak first. Someone must have something to say.
I'll say something.
All right.
Some of us know each other personally or professionally, you know, so it's always interesting. Like Jen here, who was just talking about the bridge, her and I have known each other for years, and she's someone with integrity that is beyond question. You know, I'd vouch for her any day. So I think that as far as like more formal collaboration, sometimes that's difficult because, you know, the nature of our organizations getting funded by the city is there's this kind of toxic way they do it where they want us to compete. And I think that the nature of the people who work in this field, like a social service kind of field, is to collaborate, not to compete. You know, so we're all very resistant to it, but yet we're all, you know, competing for the same funding sources, which it can be pretty scarce. And so it's challenging for sure. But I know that, you know, when I have to interact with other agencies, like I mentioned, REACH, you know, we get along great. You know, we want to work closer together, but it's kind of like we have this chaperone called the city.
Is there anyone who wants to add to that?
Well, Quest works with a bunch of the community too. So the bridge being part of Quest, we just naturally have partners. So I mentioned the library, but we also partner with the food bank a lot. And then I also work with the Urban Rest Stop with Jeff because we take clothing, give clothing, swap hygiene. I mean, so there's a lot of behind the scenes collaboration too. But yeah, Andrew's right. There's paperwork that gets in the way with that, some of that stuff.
So it sounds like the personal things are in just as between the service organizations and people who are unhoused. A lot of it has to do with personal relationships, which is kind of interesting, and it makes me really appreciate hearing from you all, because it's obvious this is all very personal. Is there anyone else who wants to chime in on this, or shall I move on?
Well, I wanted to ask a couple quick clarifying questions.
Okay.
One, I just remind folks who may not know where Quest is, if you would. And
Quest is located in the old. Yeah, we won't say that.
It's by Trader Joe's.
It's next to Trader Joe's by Mike's Chili. It's on Leary underneath the Ballard Bridge.
And it used to be Ernst Hardware.
Ernst Hardware, yes, it did. That's what I was going to say.
I wanted to just
go ahead.
Follow up a little bit. I was especially compelled by what Andrew said about the city not making it work. I mean, because so much political energy, at least, and theoretical kind of visible leadership is being pushed out there as, you know, being responsive to this problem. And yet here we have just a handful of the sort of leading operational staff, some of the organizations who are on the front lines dealing with this, saying the city can't get its act together. What's the problem? Who's saying what back to you about it?
Well, you might get me in trouble for answering questions.
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
You could say that Brent Lackey said. You could say I said.
Well, I mean, what I would say is, number one is there is an argument to be made for us throwing millions and millions of dollars at homelessness, and it seems like it's barely having an effect at all. And yet everyone here can speak to seeing people's lives changed dramatically. You know, all of us see that all the time. And so I think that ultimately, you know, Plymouth did a great job of demonstrating, are we going to pay for jails? They're very expensive. If you say all the poor people need to be in prison, are we going to pay for emergency room visits? You know, because one way or another, there is a cost to us living in a society. And by leaving people outside and not addressing the level of crisis that we're in, we're actually paying more for it. But by getting a handle on it, acknowledging how serious this is and how endemic it is, not only to our city, but our whole nation collectively, then we're not really facing up to it. And so we're all little Dutch boys with our fingers in the dam, you know, and that is the work, stopping the dam from bursting. And with the pandemic, other factors, like the rent moratorium going to expire, I'm sure many people here feel as though that dam may very well burst next year.
Well, it's certainly going to get more leaks. I mean, I don't think there's any argument about that. And you weren't here right at the very beginning, but I sort of made a statement that it's clear it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better because of some of these, exogenous things that are going on, especially this year and last, and probably into next. But what I kind of hear you saying, and what I would ask all of you to kind of address, is that, look, it actually is working. What we're doing, a lot of these things is moving people through, like the tiny villages are a fantastic example of people getting through. I'm over here in Whittier Heights myself, so I go by the tiny village up the street that you're at, Alyssa, all the time. But what I also hear you saying is it's working at it, and I think people think this in the community, that it's working at a rate that's just not really viable for actually helping ameliorate the broader social problem or the broader economic problem. If we're helping just this tiny little margin of people at some rate, especially if that rate plays the rate at which people are being added to the houseless community, then you're fighting a net losing battle, right? So is that true? What do you think?
It's kind of being in that position of treading water, on very depressing days. That's what it can feel like. It can feel like more people fall into homelessness and poverty than we can lift out. So that can really take its toll on people.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it about having a lot more people with a lot more buckets in the boat to bail it out? I mean, is it just throw a hell of a lot more money at the problem and it'll really start catching up? What is it?
Well, I think that there's kind of like this drive, and maybe it's a modern phenomena, believing that we can use efficiency. We can cut things leaner and leaner and leaner, as though we're talking about Amazon and not human lives. And efficiency will make it so the problem gets addressed quicker. But we're just not doing it to scale. So we have 8 tiny house villages, soon to be 9, concurrently existing in Seattle. And so let's say that's about 350 to 400 people. And then, of course, over a year, it's more like 700, 800 people that get housed and new people come into the village. There's still 12,000 people that are homeless. Right. So are we scaling in proportion, to the actual issue? And then what is the bottleneck for the tiny house villages that I work for? The bottleneck is how much affordable, deeply affordable housing is there to place people into. If that was double the number of villagers would get housed.
Great response. What about the permanent shelter? Kathy, Lena, Hannah, what do you guys say about that?
Yeah, well, I'll say that, similar for permanent supportive housing, there's a lot more need than spots that there are currently in the city. And so actually one thing that Plymouth has been doing to address this, we did a capital campaign over the past year to increase our portfolio by about 50%, a really significant amount to meet that need. And another thing I'll add on, in response to your question, Brent, about what do we do about the fact that it feels like we're treading water, like the problem is getting worse before it's getting better. All of us are working on the end of preventing homelessness for people who are already experiencing it. But there are a lot of organizations and efforts to prevent people from falling into homelessness in the first place. Preventing people from being evicted, providing people rental assistance. And I think that's a really critical piece of addressing the bigger problem.
Yeah, definitely. Too bad we have the U.S. Congress, we do, but I won't go there. So
can we jump back to Jody had some more questions?
Yeah, sure. I won't take over the conversation. Yep, that sounds fine.
All right. One of the questions had to do with good neighbor agreements. I know that that was touched on in the presentation by URNESS House. Are there any other comments about that from providers? I know that there's always a balance that needs to be struck between housed and unhoused, and the relationships between that, and safety of housed and unhoused and the connections. And good neighbor agreements are a way to attempt to work on this. Do you have any comments about how they're working? Are they getting updated? What provisions do you think are helpful? Anyone have anything they want to say about the good neighbor agreements?
I can say something as a newbie to the neighborhood at Plymouth. And to be clear, our project won't be required to have a good neighbor agreement, but and that's sort of my point here is we're all here, I think, by our own free will to be good neighbors. So that's sort of my opinion on the agreements is you have some folks that are really committed to being good neighbors. And hopefully, you know, as new to the neighborhood, you'll invite us in so we can continue that as relational people and organizations, just like the district council is an organization, Plymouth is as well, but we're also people and we want to be here to talk to you. And I think that's probably the same sentiment as the other providers, but I'll let them answer it.
All right, anyone else
I'll,
want
I'll say something about it.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
want to ask a spicier version of that and have Andrew
Yes. Maybe my comment will address the spicy one. So good neighbor agreements are great. And it also is a form to be restrictive. Sometimes they are used as tools to deny low-income housing from being built, the establishment of something like a tiny house village or a shelter. You know, and they're masquerading as concern for the local neighborhood. But, you know, it's kind of like, to use something, you know, a little more controversial, it's like creating laws or restrictions around how many trees need to be around an abortion clinic. Those are not actually goals to care about how many trees there are. They're ways to masquerade restrictions on where these things can be. So, but there are good faith neighbor agreements. So I'll just say briefly, like for the tiny house villages, we have a code of conduct that villagers are expected to follow. And we try to instill the values in our clients that we should appreciate the neighborhood, which is allowing the village to have this property. We don't want to force it on any area or any neighborhood, you know, feeling like we're just, well, we bought it, so we're building it. You know, we want, like he was just saying, oh, Tim, that we want to be friends with the neighborhood. We want to have good relationships, and we try to instill those values, you know, from the very first time someone enters a village, you know, until they're eventually housed.
Jody, do you mind if I jump in?
Go ahead.
I think one of the things we were hoping on getting at with a question like that, Ballard has so many different services and facilities, and a lot of it's low barrier. And we also, as a neighborhood, really have issues with meth use and heroin use, you know, with property crime, with dangerous, you know, physical outbursts, with people who just are not able to kind of operate within normal, safe bounds. And so it seems like so many of the facilities are really well run. When I go by the urban rest stop, it's very tidy. You know, people are coming and going about their business. There's very clear signs saying what the rules are, and they seem to be followed. But at the very other end of the block, you know, there's terrible issues outside of the library and at Ballard Commons Park. We have people who've been living in vehicles in very desperate, you know, situations for years, some for, you know, a decade or more. There's such a concentration of things going on, and it's not really fair for any one facility or organization to be responsible for that. But how do we, you know, through good neighbor agreements or through collaboration, how do we work on best practices? How do we think a little more holistically? Because now we're seeing, you know, we're trying to approach things more regionally. We're seeing Renton and SeaTac, you know, passing legislation that would never let anything happen like is happening in Ballard. We're never going to be able to house everyone just within Ballard, just within Seattle. And the whole idea of harm reduction and low barrier isn't really flying in every community. So how do we talk more openly about that and really make it visibly, you know, work for the fuller population so that people can talk about the issues, work on the issues. So we often have a good neighbor agreement that starts when a facility opens, and then people kind of just get distracted and burned out, and nobody's really accountable for updating it, and nothing really happens over time. And like I said, each facility can't solve all these issues on their own. So anyway, we were curious to try and kind of just have a conversation with people who are working on this full time. And I know you guys know about all these issues and experience them also, but curious, how can Seattle share more best practices from the neighborhood level on up so that hopefully we won't see neighboring municipalities pushing back so hard against it?
That's really interesting.
That's a big, I know that's a big,
like the regional housing authority, the constant making it so it's a regional solution to homelessness. It sounds great, and the other areas need to do their part as well, like their local mayors. It can't all just be Seattle. And in many ways, it's a national issue because there's just not economic opportunity and opportunities in other states, counties, and cities. And so the mega cities are absorbing the crisis because this is where economic opportunity is. And that's reflected even in people who have very little. Imagine being homeless, having nothing, living in abject poverty, and we're in a small town in Indiana. You're going to die, and so you're going to try to escape where there is a huge concentration of economic opportunity. And that's where we are. And so, I would say, like, if we look at Ballard Commons Park or like the library, I lived in Ballard many years, that you doing nothing, we see what that looks like, right? Doing little, we see it get a little bit better, but so are we going to deal with it or not?
I don't know if people can tell if what's getting better or not, because we've had so many crises upon crises. And so honestly, it just at the street level keeps getting worse in Ballard, I think is the honest answer.
Yes.
That's certainly the vast majority opinion here in Ballard, is that we don't have an improvement, but probably really more a worsening of the felt experience, especially in downtown.
Though it might not be like just like universal fact. One example I'll give you is that a local neighborhood group in the New Holly neighborhood down on MLK, at their children's park, right by a lot of low-income housing that's there was an encampment that was growing. And this is recently, it just talked about in the Seattle Times. And so they, were talking to their council person. They talked to us at LIHI, and they were like, can you not sweep people, not bully them away? Can you offer them anything like a tiny house? And so myself and Alyssa, we went down there and brought some snacks and soda to chat with people. And we had access to open tiny houses. And when we went, there was about 16 people camping there. How many people said no? One. And it was obvious that they were suffering from serious mental health issues. So given enough time, I'm sure they would say yes, but we only had a day or two to try to resolve it. And I look at Ballard Commons the same way. Why are people hanging out near the library? There's a bathroom, there's internet. That is why they're there, because there's space to put a tent. That's why. These are all practical survival reasons.
There's also a lot of drugs, and there's very little police enforcement. And so people are able to take care of other business that way.
Well, I would say if we opened a village, like in Crown Hill or Ballard, and said, everyone at the Commons, would you like a tiny house at the village? How many people do you think are going to say, yeah?
A lot of them,
A lot, and probably for the whole region. And so then the question is, how can Seattle house
Step up and scale up?
Yell at Dan Strauss, that's how.
I had another question that I wanted to
a lot of people yell at him. Go ahead, Jim.
ask before, while we still have time. How can the Ballard District Council better interact with service providers so that we get beyond the basic information you've given us and really develop more of a partnership to help scale up, partner, accomplish more of what we would all like to have done?
I'll jump in. I think we're doing it right now. I think having these conversations is so important, giving this opportunity to hear from the neighborhood, hear these concerns, these questions. I know that we're not going to be able to answer a lot of these questions thoroughly in this time we have tonight. So to continue this, over time. And I mean, the needs will change. So we'll need to keep having these conversations. Unfortunately, it is going to be a little bit of a long game. This is going to take some time to effectively do this in a way that really supports people. So it's good to be able to hear directly from the community, and to have this dialogue.
And the other question that kind of ties in with this is there some way that we from Seattle, as well as the service providers working here, can communicate with places like Renton and SeaTac and let them know what can be done, how things can work, so that we don't get more and more of the people and the need for more work than we can do, and the problems concentrated here in Seattle. Can we somehow spread the knowledge of what works and the ideas that have possibilities to these places, so it's not just Seattle left with the whole situation?
I could say, having come from a community meeting like this in Bellevue last night for one of our new projects that's across a parking lot from a 100-bed men's shelter there. Yeah, I think that's the most powerful advocacy, a group like yours could do, is to reach out to those places you just said, Renton or SeaTac or Bellevue, where frankly, they're telling us, we're looking at Seattle and we want nothing to do with the way that homelessness is being addressed there. And sorry to be so frank, but it's not, somebody's got to lead by example. Every community needs to accept some responsibility in this problem that's facing our region. But everybody wants to only address the visible homelessness in their community. And the reality of it is, can't say this directly to folks in Bellevue, but a lot of the people experiencing homelessness on the east side are when they do find their way into the system and find housing, it's in Seattle, because there's just not a pipeline throughout the county. And they're so afraid that people are coming from Seattle to get housed there and they want local. It's just this never-ending cycle until folks step up and say, hey, we did it the regional way, and we didn't micromanage the providers or the city or the county and say, we have to end homelessness of the people that I can see, because I don't want to see it anymore in my neighborhood. We have to just take our share across the county. That's my opinion of, we need more of an example of communities stepping up and saying, we'll be a part of the system and it's not so bad. So if you guys feel like it's not so bad, maybe you can talk to some of the communities that are, or if it is, or if it's things that you don't want to watch out for, Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is the public safety side of it. It's really hard to successfully tell that story in Seattle right now. And so I think that, if you're spouting national statistics about how housing first works or how different, strategies work, we need to figure out how to solve things more at the neighborhood level in Seattle to be able to tell that story successfully. So no matter how successful any one agency is, if the park at the end of the street is not very usable by the general population or is requiring huge amounts of money and still, looks kind of devastated, how do you tell that story? And so it's not easy discussion to have, and it's not something that any one agency can solve.
And we also have to be aware that that there is crime and there is homelessness, and it's not one circle. It's two circles and they overlap. So that we have to develop strategies of combating crime, because if housed people are in danger of crime, unhoused people are even more so. But the perceptions, but it's very difficult to separate the crime element from the unhoused element. And we often don't do a very good job of that. So I think we're still looking for models that will help us scale up. We have a lot of things we know work. How do we scale them up? And how do we do it in a way that well, that sells, that is obviously successful. So I think that everyone in Seattle who's working on these issues, and it's really great to hear from so many people, we need to help you more to publicize and celebrate what you're accomplishing, and to help and to make it so that these efforts can be scaled up. Because if you know, things aren't going to get any better individually or collectively, and we are sort of treading water barely. So I see that we really need to work together. We need to recognize the problems for housed people, for unhoused people, for all the groups that are working toward the problem. We need to, I don't know how we're going to get it done, but we really need to. And there are economic benefits to doing it and personal benefits to doing it for the community as a whole, and for the housed and unhoused people, as well as for the criminal justice system and the hospital system and so many others.
Well,
so I think what we have to do is look forward to working together more and better somehow.
right. I mean, you've definitely kind of explicated just how complicated it is to even talk about it, Jody, right there. Obviously, it's not a problem we thought we'd solve tonight, but I think a lot of what's kind of coming out of this discussion is how nascent, in some ways, maybe the conversation between organizations and service providers and those who are sort of on the front lines of trying to deal with the homelessness, which is all of you folks, and organizations like ours, that it just this conversation hasn't been going on very deeply or very long yet. There's kind of political folks talking heads over here, media playing it one way or the other just for their own sort of political purposes. And then neighbors just scratching their heads thinking, man, I don't want people broke and dying. And I also don't want the broken, dying people living across the street in my park, So economic problem ultimately. But it does suggest to me that we could make more of an attempt as the Ballard District Council kind of into the coming next couple of years to try and foment a little more of a conversation about this. Maybe we can work with some folks over at Ballard Alliance to think about some kind of a working group or some kind of a strategy that would let this conversation go on, not just sort of as a kind of public presentation meeting like it is tonight, but try and start knocking our heads together and get people like you to sit down, and we just start thinking about what can we do to kind of help make this a regional solution. What's the county executive's role, but also just what's the Ballard citizenry role and that kind of thing. And I don't have the answer now, but I guess it does strike me that this conversation hasn't gotten as far yet as I would have thought it would have, with us and others participating. So let's all just agree to sort of try again for another sort of longer and ongoing kind of policy effort on this. And we can certainly serve as, not the ultimate kind of connection to the neighbors of Ballard. I mean, we're not reaching the kind of thousands of folks who live here, unfortunately, but we do aspire to keep trying to get people to understand there is a community organization, and there are a number of community organizations, and people can be more involved, people especially who are dissatisfied with the way things are going. We want people to at least be listening and having a voice and getting engaged. So count on us, I guess, to be back in touch after tonight to try and get more of your time. Really super duper appreciate all the thoughts you guys have shared with us tonight. I guess I want to end by kind of making a plea to those who are just watching us that it's the holidays. It's a traditional time in the United States of America for trying to be generous, be charitable, kind of really think about the fact that all these folks are doing some really hard work. And I think I heard all of them say that, their clientele could use your help in a variety of ways right now, because we have this really horrible disease epidemic going on in our country that doesn't so much depend on volunteer time as it might normally really benefit from. So I guess I want to encourage those of you out in Ballard who I know fit right within a very high economic demographic to reach into your pocketbooks and try and do something for some of the folks who are really impoverished right now, folks who are struggling, whether they're homeless folks or just folks down the street who were working at the best bistro in town and now don't have an income. Try to help each other out right now, because it's ultimately a really big crisis of growing poverty that we're talking about, that a variety of folks are trying to help us address on a lot of different ways. And as their neighbors, we got to try and take care of each other. So we'll try and get figured out what we're doing in January and be back in touch. Thanks everyone for hanging in there 15 minutes longer than we intended to. We ran over, but we had a lot of fine guests tonight. So I think that's probably it for closing words. I'll just say thank you to all of you very much. Lena, Hannah, Jody, Kathy, Jen, Andrew, Alyssa, Tim, all of you. Your organizations are doing great work. Keep in touch with us, please.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
Thanks.